Guys, there's nothing I wanted more than the Dallas Mavericks to defeat the Boston Celtics in the NBA Finals, because now the Boston Celtics officially have the most championships in NBA history, a record that they were tied with the Lakers for prior to this year. And it's very well deserved, and this team is incredibly well constructed, but there's one question now that we all have in the back of our minds as a result of the Boston Celtics defeating the Dallas Mavericks in the NBA Finals. Where do the Mavericks go from here? I mean, they certainly overachieved this season, and 1 year removed from tanking the remainder of their season, they made it to the NBA Finals. But how do they improve? Well, there's a multitude of ways for the Mavericks to go about this. So before we get some content, we are on the grind to 1 million subscribers. So make sure you're subscribed and have our notifications on, because we're going to keep you guys up to date throughout the entire offseason with everything that's going on in the NBA. And now that we get all that out of the way, do the intro. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? After winning 50 games in the regular season and defeating 3 of the top 5 teams in the entire NBA on the way to their finals matchup with the Boston Celtics, a lot of people were actually convinced that Dallas was going to win their first championship since the Dirk Nowitzki era and establish Luka Doncic firmly as one of their all-time greats. Yeah, that didn't happen. As a matter of fact, they choked in front of the 2011 NBA championship team during Game 3 of the NBA Finals. Not only did that happen, but the Mavericks didn't even come close. From the beginning of Game 1, it was abundantly clear that the Dallas Mavericks were simply outmatched. And I hate to admit it, they're potentially outcoached as well, despite having a coach with significantly more experience than, well, this guy.
For the first time since 1975, this is the NBA Finals where you have 2 black head coaches. Given the plight sometimes of black head coaches in the NBA, do you think this is a significant moment? Do you take pride in this? How do you view this, or do you not see it at all?
I wonder how many of those have been Christian coaches. David Aldridge?
Joe Mazzulla is by far the greatest interview of all time, and I don't care what anyone says. That aside, I hate to say it, but I think I speak for the majority here when I say that we would have rather seen the Nuggets or even the Timberwolves go up against the Boston Celtics. But let's step back a moment and remember that the Mavericks were the 5th seed in the Western Conference. The fact that they made it as far as they did is somewhat astonishing and is for sure impressive to say the least. After all, they were only the 2nd 5 seed in NBA history to make it to the finals, joining the Jimmy Butler-led Miami Heat that lost to my Lakers in the 2020 championship bubble in one of the most meaningful championship games in NBA history. What? It counted. As a matter of fact, that championship was harder to win than any other championship in NBA history. But even that outmatched Miami Heat team managed to squeak out 2 wins and prove themselves a worthy opponent despite being outmatched on paper, which means that we have to wonder why this wasn't the case with this Mavericks team and how they didn't put up a better fight. Look, I know it's frustrating that we've been getting very one-sided NBA Finals over the past 2 years, and in the Miami Heat's case, it was very similar to the Dallas Mavericks' case. They were both teams that overachieved, that didn't have the depth that their opponents had. But at the same time, when you have a team that has Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic, you would have imagined that it would have been much more of a series. I mean, going into this series, we were dubbing Luka and Kyrie as the best backcourt in NBA history, and just a few games into the NBA Finals, we were saying that Luka Doncic needs help. If you ask me, I think that even though the Mavericks had a lot of success on their journey, the final result of their Cinderella run could wind up being the catalyst for some changes in Dallas if they want to put themselves back in this position in the coming years. Which brings me to what I believe is the single biggest change they need to make. And no, it's not one that involves free agency, but we'll throw out some crazy ideas for you guys in the latter part of this video, because come on, who doesn't love dreaming of crazy free agent scenarios? It doesn't involve the NBA draft, it doesn't involve one of Kyrie Irving's ridiculously looking earrings, or Jason Kidd and halting his own team's momentum in Game 3 when he called a horrific timeout, which has caused some Mavericks fans to start second guessing him as a head coach. To be honest, I can't really blame them. Who the hell calls a timeout when their team is on a 22-2 run? done. This is almost as egregious as when Jason Kidd asked one of his own players to bump into him and spill his drink so the Brooklyn Nets could finesse a timeout. If you ask me, the most important part of this year's playoffs is one thing has become crystal clear. Dallas Mavericks offense is incredibly one-dimensional, and Luka Doncic plays absolutely no defense. I know there's a lot of people that call Luka Doncic James Harden 2.0, but at least prime James Harden made some sort of an effort, which is something I don't think I would ever say while making an NBA video, because that was what we were roasting James Harden for. Look at these numbers, for crying out loud. They are historically bad. Celtics players are absolutely feasting on the poor man at almost a 70% clip of their drives with him as the primary defender, which would end in blow-bys. You can say whatever you want about Luka Doncic. Yes, he's one of the best offensive players of all time with the ball in his hands. And yes, if he plays for 23 years and continues at this pace, he might be able to break LeBron James' scoring record, which is a pretty big if. Who the hell would want to play basketball for that long? And yes, Luka is the main reason the Mavericks made it as far as they did to begin with. But that doesn't change the fact that one of the primary reasons, if not the main reason, that the Celtics dominated the Mavericks so easily was that Joe Mazzulla and company were fully aware that Luka Doncic would have trouble playing defense. If Mavericks ownership and Jason Kidd want this team to take the next step and hang their second banner in their franchise's history, then their first order of business need to involve someone in their front office having the stones to call in Doncic for a meeting with the coaching staff so that they can all watch a few hours of tape showing his porous defense. And I'm not the only one that's saying this. The great Brian Windhorst also agrees with me on this take.
If Luka's ever going to be a winner coming out of this tunnel here, he is going to have to use what's happened in this finals as a learning experience. His defensive performance is unacceptable. He is a hole on the court. The Celtics are attacking him. They are ahead in this series because they have attacked him defensively. And you've got a situation here where Luka is complaining about the officiating. They have begged him. They have talked with him. They have pleaded with him. He is costing his team because of how he treats the officials. He's a brilliant player. He does so many things well. They are here because of how he did. His performance in this game is unacceptable and the reason why the Mavericks are not going to win.
Now, I don't want it to sound like I'm bagging on Luka Doncic for getting his ass kicked in the NBA Finals, because LeBron James also got his ass kicked in the NBA Finals. Whenever you overachieve in bringing your team to the NBA Finals, unfortunately, this tends to happen. But the thing is, the Dallas Mavericks still have a window of opportunity. Their road to the NBA Finals was significantly more difficult than the Boston Celtics, and that's not to say that the Boston Celtics wouldn't have succeeded if everybody was fully healthy. But you have to admit, their road was easier to the finals than the Dallas Mavericks was. But the problem that the Mavericks have is that the Western Conference is only going to get stronger. Denver's clearly going to attempt to reclaim the bench depth that won them the 2023 NBA championship. The Phoenix Suns got a brand new head coach in Mike Budenholzer. Among other things, the Minnesota Timberwolves agreed with a contract extension with Tim Connolly, and Anthony Edwards will have another year of maturation underneath his belt. So even if Luka Doncic does make significant strides defensively, the Dallas Mavericks will nonetheless need to make other changes as well. With Kyrie Irving set to turn 33 years old next season, the Mavericks could use another option on offense to take some of the burden off of their two stars. And the Mavericks attempted to do this in Game 3 with Tim Hardaway Jr. being reinserted into the rotation, but he wasn't able to do anything against the Boston Celtics. He went 0 for 5 in 20 minutes played. So where could the Mavericks turn to? Well, they currently don't have a first-round pick in this year's NBA draft, but the upcoming free agency class is absolutely loaded with elite talent, meaning that the Mavericks could feasibly put themselves in a position to create one of the best big threes in the league should they be willing to spend. Some reports are already out there that the Mavericks could be exactly what Klay Thompson needs to invigorate the home stretch of his career. And say what you want about his fall off and his final game of the season, but the man still averaged just about a bucket under 20 points per game last year and shot almost 40% from deep. Having turned down a 2-year $48 million contract from the Warriors last summer, it could be an indicator that if it does come down to it, the 4-time NBA champion would be willing to swallow his pride and change teams. Being that the Mavericks currently hold the type of contracts that they would need for a sign and trade, they could be the benefactor here if they are willing to give the sharpshooter and perimeter defender the type of contract he feels deserving of. After all, California has a 12.5% state income tax, whereas Dallas doesn't have a state income tax. But even if they don't go that route, they have other options out there as well. Some notable free agents that they could try to make a splash for could be DeMar DeRozan, Paul George, OG Anunoby, or Pascal Siakam, who they've actually been previously linked to. And I know as these names get progressively more and more unrealistic, because the Mavericks would have to do some gymnastics to clear some salary cap space, there's a big name out there that has been linked to the Mavericks before. This part's a little absurd. And you can tell it's absurd because Stephen A. Smith believes it could be a possibility.
Bronny James might not make it to the Lakers' second round pick because if a team like the Dallas Mavericks could position themselves to get him in the second round, they'll take him because LeBron said he wants to go where his son goes. And if you're the Dallas Mavericks and you got Kyrie and you got Luka and LeBron James is willing to come to Big D, Dallas, Texas, that might be the first time something's more popular than the Cowboys.
It does sound absolutely crazy, and LeBron James has said before that he wishes he was Kyrie Irving's teammate once again.
Sitting here watching it, you know, I'm playing like so happy and so proud and to watch him and continue his growth and whatever the case may be. And at the same time, I'm so mad at the same time that I am not his running mate anymore.
But the Mavericks do have a second round pick, and they do have the ability to trade away a number of contracts that could free up a decent amount of space for such a move. And so if the Mavericks are willing to give him his desired 3-year contract with his former running mate Kyrie Irving already on the roster, and with Luka Doncic in place to take away a lot of the offensive burden that LeBron has grown accustomed to carrying, Mavericks could potentially lure him in by selecting Bronny with the 58th pick. And strategically, this could make a lot of sense for both parties. LeBron would be the perfect mentor to a 25-year-old Luka Doncic and could teach him what it truly means to be great, not only offensively, but on both defensively as well.
I wanted Luka to be the first signee of Team LeBron. I wanted him to be my guy. I wanted him to be my first guy because I just love what he stands for. I love everything about him, both on the court and off the court. He's
Could you just imagine LeBron James going up to Luka and saying,
"This is not your fault. You need to go up to the general manager and tell him that he needs to gut out all of the team and their assets for a superstar, form a big three, so you could either fail to make it into the playoffs, get almost swept in the first round of the playoffs, or get swept in the Western Conference Finals. Once they run out of assets, Luka, you gotta leave this team and find a new team to do that to."
Jokes aside, I think this would be cute, but I feel like LeBron James wouldn't leave the Los Angeles Lakers at this point to stay in the West, but it would be an adorable story. The problem is, are the Dallas Mavericks good enough to run it back with this exact same group and try to make it into the NBA Finals? I say this about each and every team in the Western Conference. Ground is constantly being made up. The Minnesota Timberwolves are young and hungry. The OKC Thunder were supposed to be in another rebuilding year. It was Chet Holmgren's rookie season and they were the top seed. The Denver Nuggets' problem is relatively easy and they just need to fill the void that was left behind by the departure of Jeff Green and Bruce Brown. Phoenix Suns still have Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal. The Houston Rockets were making a push towards the end of the season this past year, and that's before we even bring up Victor Wembanyama and the San Antonio Spurs. The chances of the Mavericks being able to make it back to this point with this exact roster isn't very high. But the good news is that their general manager, Nico Harrison, already has proven to us that he's a more than capable general manager. The mid-season trades that he made for Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington not only worked spectacularly and proved to be strokes of genius, but they were both also made on quite favorable contracts with an eye toward the future. If moves like these were a sign of things to come, then Mavericks fans can rest a little lighter knowing that they have one of the best GMs in the game. The Mavericks have been a very respectable franchise for quite some time now. Ever since Mark Cuban bought the team in 2000, they've had the second best winning percentage league-wide at 59%, behind only the San Antonio Spurs. This is to say that though they bowed out a bit unheroically in this year's NBA Finals, they still have a lot of great pieces in place, as well as a management team that both knows how to and wants to win. That alone is a lot more than many teams have. Yes, they could use a better third option than Tim Hardaway Jr., but they have great offensive firepower, a great pair of young big men with Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively, a head coach in Jason Kidd, who is decent at his job when he's not doing wild shit like this, and a general manager that has already proven to us over the past year that he is more than capable of making the right decision. It's never been more clear that even if the Mavericks do manage to somehow claw out of the West again, that in order to stop the Brad Stevens machine, they're going to have some wing defense capable of slowing down the two J's, whether that's by way of Luka improving that part of his game, or whether it's bringing in outside reinforcements. They learned the hard way this year that usually the teams with stars that play defense win championships. Let me know in the comment section down below. How could the Mavericks improve from here? Do you think this year was a fluke, or do you think it's only a matter of time that Luka Doncic makes it back to the NBA Finals? Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.